Okay, so this is an annotation guide for Kate Grenville's The Lieutenant. The success criteria is for you to record these themes, symbols and motifs somewhere on the inside cover of your book and be able to use them as a reference point to annotate with a bit of guidance the text that you've been set. So the 4 themes of the book are friendship, language, shared history and culture. So just in brief, the friendship that the main character has with both his colonial fellow workers and the Indigenous members of Australia is a key theme, and how these friendships differ based on who they are. The second theme is language, so he's learning a lot of new language and he's also quite rich in using his own language, and also his close friend is especially tempted and powerful with using his own language that he often borrows in his writings. So shared history is a key theme in the respect that he doesn't have a shared history with the Indigenous people, and how valuable he finds his shared history with his fellow colonial oppressors throughout the book. And lastly, culture. So as the book unfolds, we get to understand his culture more, and also the Indigenous culture and the clashes that emerges, and also references to his past and his present, and which culture is truly his British culture or his newfound Australian culture. So in regard to symbols, this is something you can really add to. There's just a really rough list to get you started so that when these things emerge within the story, you're aware of their symbolic significance. The 2 obvious ones are loaded guns and the red jackets or red coats of the soldiers. And these symbolise everything bad basically about the colonial occupation of Australia, and especially to the main protagonist of the story. He doesn't fully ascribe himself to these objects, but he finds himself carrying them and using them and taking on the persona that they provide. Then there's Putawara and Warabara, that are 2 Indigenous words that he learns and he has a particular affinity to. Warabara is the sweet tea that he takes to drinking, and he finds a certain connection with the main character within the story as well. And the Putawa is an expression of a certain Platonic intimacy, which you'll come to understand as you read through the novel. Then there's 2 more symbols of oppression, the axe and the cat of 9 tails. So the axe is used to clear the forest to make it more similar to the English territory that they understand. And the cat of 9 tails, of course, is a direct weapon of oppression used to oppress the British people in Australia and also the Indigenous population. Then there's exile and language. Our main character is constantly in a state of exile as he conceives of it. And language is of course something that he feels not especially comfortable with, but is something that he deals with very well, and something that he understands in a very mathematical and simple understanding of language and how it works. And the last one is Patyagarang, or I'm not exactly sure how you'd pronounce that, but it's another Indigenous word that he learns and takes a particular affinity to, and it means roughly to glue something onto something existing. And this is basically a symbol of how he fits within Australia and how he's part of the colony but not entirely part of the colony, which is something you'll sort of understand as you read through the novel. So motifs are symbols that run throughout the entire novel, and the 2 basic ones to start off with are the cosmos and astronomy, which is one way that he really understands the world, and he is often using it as a symbolic representation of how he feels or how his character or how his confidence is developing throughout the story. Then there's the 2 contrasting motifs of abundance and bread and salt beef. So they are surrounded by abundance, and Indigenous people are living quite a comfortable, happy, carefree life, living off the abundance of the land, and then the British people are struggling with bread and salt beef, which of course the Indigenous people don't actually enjoy or take any special affinity to. But it just shows the contrasting lifestyles of these 2 groups and how they, in the same environment, have 2 very different understandings of abundance and what they can eat as a result. Then there's fear, which is something that increases throughout the novel, especially among the colony. And then ASD, which is autism spectrum disorder. It seems quite clear that the main character has some form of autism or ASD, which of course was not a known condition until perhaps the 90s. So this is something for you to keep in the back of your mind, that he might have certain social issues or a certain condition that would cause him to behave and respond in the way that he responds. Your job, of course, is to decide whether he is a realistic portrayal of this disorder or if it's just something of a literary device used by the author. Then there's machinery and the empire. So he's often requires machinery, and he talks about it quite specifically, which of course relates quite closely to the condition of ASD. People typically are very maths focused, they like machines, wheels, and this is very true of the main character. There's the empire and belonging, so he is part of the empire, but he never truly feels like he belongs, and he's often talking about his belonging to his previous home, and towards the end of the novel he's reflecting back on where and when he may have belonged. And there's colonialism, which is just basically a group coming and making a colony or taking over a country to be part of a colony for the wider national group that they are a part of. And then lastly, there's ideals. So he has a lot of high-minded ideals about how he will interact and how he will behave, but these tend to deteriorate throughout the novel. As you go through the novel, something you're really going to have to focus on is characterization. Just to give you some real rough sketches before you start, Rook is a chess piece, and it can only go straight and to the right and to the left, but it only moves in straight lines, most importantly. So keep that in mind as one form of characterization of Rook, and whether it fits with your understanding or whether you disagree with this very simple, straight line, straight-minded person. Secondly, there's the last name Silk. So you're thinking about silk. Turning a pig's ear into a silk purse is an old saying that fits quite well here. This character has a certain way with language. Do you think it's true that he is slick and able to weave yarns out of nothing? These are, again, just two really basic ideas of their names and the possible meanings of their names. What you'll need to be doing is recording the characterization of each of the characters. So anytime they're described in any detailed or meaningful way, you'll want to be putting their initials or some sort of symbol relating to each character. Like you could draw a picture of a rook, chess piece for rook, a piece of silk for silk or similar, and use these really rough characterizations or some way of memorizing or understanding their character in a broader sense than just their name and their role within the story, and really noting down key characterizations of these characters.